Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Growing up in a predominantly white suburb in the Midwest, I was no stranger to racism. I had experienced everything from subtle microaggressions to blatant discrimination. But I never imagined that I would become a victim of a corrupt legal system that was supposed to protect me. It all started when I was pulled over by a police officer for a broken taillight. As an African-American woman, I was well aware of the dangers of interacting with the police, so I did my best to be polite and comply with the officer's demands. But that wasn't enough. The officer accused me of driving under the influence and arrested me even though I had not been drinking. I was taken to the police station and booked on charges of DUI. I was terrified, but I knew I was innocent, so I hired a lawyer and prepared to fight the charges. But the legal system had other plans for me. The prosecutor assigned to my case was a known racist who had a history of targeting African-American defendants. He presented false evidence and twisted the facts to make it look like I was guilty. The judge presiding over my case was also biased against me, and he denied my lawyer's requests for additional evidence and witnesses. Despite the lack of evidence against me, I was found guilty and sentenced to a year in jail. I was devastated. I had lost everything: my job, my apartment, my reputation, and my freedom. But I refused to give up. I knew I was innocent, and I was determined to clear my name. I spent the next year in jail fighting my case from behind bars. I wrote letters to lawyers, activists, and journalists trying to get anyone to listen to my story. But it was a long and lonely fight. The legal system was stacked against me, and nobody wanted to get involved. But then, something miraculous happened. A young lawyer from a civil rights organization heard about my case and decided to take it on. He reviewed my case and discovered that the evidence presented against me was falsified and that the judge and prosecutor had violated my constitutional rights. With the help of this new lawyer, we appealed my case, and after a long and difficult battle, the appellate court overturned my conviction. I was finally free, but I was also angry. I had lost a year of my life, my reputation, and my trust in the legal system. But I didn't let my anger consume me. I used it to fuel my passion for justice. I became an advocate for criminal justice reform and worked tirelessly to ensure that nobody else would have to go through what I went through. Years later, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from the prosecutor who had falsely accused me. He apologized for his role in my wrongful conviction and offered to help me with anything I needed. I was shocked, but also relieved. It was a small victory, but it was a step towards healing and reconciliation. Update. In the years since my wrongful conviction, I have continued to work as an advocate for criminal justice reform. I have spoken at conferences, written articles, and organized rallies to raise awareness of the injustices faced by marginalized communities. I have also worked with organizations to provide legal representation and support to people who have been wrongfully convicted. Recently, I received an invitation to speak at a national conference on criminal justice reform. I was nervous, but excited to share my story and my message with a wider audience. As I walked onto the stage, I felt a sense of empowerment and pride. I knew that I had overcome incredible obstacles, and I had made a difference in the lives of others. After my speech, a woman approached me and introduced herself as a journalist. She told me that she had been following my work for a long time and was interested in writing a feature on me and my journey to justice. I was honored and agreed to speak with her. Over the next few weeks, the journalist interviewed me extensively, delving into the details of my wrongful conviction, my time in jail, and my work as an advocate for criminal justice reform. She also spoke with lawyers, activists, and other experts in the field to get a broader perspective on the issue. When the article was finally published, it was a sensation. It was picked up by major news outlets and shared widely on social media. People from all over the country reached out to me, thanking me for my bravery and my work. I was overwhelmed by the response. But with the increased attention came increased scrutiny. Some people accused me of making up my story or exaggerating the facts. Others questioned my motives and accused me of being a troublemaker or a radical. I was hurt by the accusations, but I also knew that they were a natural part of the process. When you challenge the status quo, you are bound to face pushback. But I was determined to stay true to my mission and to continue fighting for justice. One day, I received an email from the prosecutor who had falsely accused me. He wanted to meet with me in person to apologize again and to discuss how he could make amends for his actions. I was hesitant at first, but I decided to hear him out. We met at a coffee shop, and he was contrite and sincere. He told me that he had been struggling with guilt and shame ever since my case had been overturned. He said that he had been grappling with the fact that he had been part of a system that had oppressed and marginalized people like me for far too long. He asked me what he could do to make things right. I told him that the best thing he could do was to use his position of power and influence to advocate for change. I urged him to work with other prosecutors and legal experts to reform the criminal justice system and to ensure that no one else would have to go through what I went through. To my surprise, he agreed. He began speaking out about the need for reform and advocating for policies that would promote fairness and equity in the legal system. He also reached out to other people he had wronged and apologized to them as well. It was a small step, but it was a meaningful one. It showed me that change was possible, even in the most unlikely places. It also showed me that forgiveness and reconciliation were powerful tools for healing and transformation. In the years since my wrongful conviction, I have continued to fight for justice and to advocate for change. I have spoken at conferences, written articles, and organized rallies. I have also worked with organizations to provide legal representation and support to people who have been wrongfully convicted, and while there is still much work to be done, I am hopeful. I am hopeful that one day we will live in a world where the legal system is truly just and equitable, where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their race or background. And I'm committed to doing my part to make that world a reality. The next one is an entitled People Story. It was a sunny afternoon and my elderly mother was feeling unwell. She had been experiencing heart issues lately and we were instructed to call COP if any symptoms worsened. As I sat with her, she started to show signs that required immediate medical attention. I called COP and waited anxiously for the ambulance to arrive. While waiting, I realized that my neighbor had parked his car in the middle of the street, blocking the way for the ambulance to reach our driveway. I couldn't believe my eyes. I had dealt with his inconsiderate parking before, but this time, his actions could have had serious consequences. I immediately went outside to see if I could reason with him, but he was sitting in his car, refusing to budge. I explained the situation to him, but he was too preoccupied with his own grievances to listen. He threatened to call the police and tow the ambulance and even started honking his horn aggressively. It was a nightmare. My mother's condition was deteriorating by the second, and there was nothing I could do to get her the help she needed. I could hear the ambulance sirens approaching, but they were stuck behind my neighbor's car. It was a moment of utter helplessness and desperation. When the ambulance finally arrived, the paramedics rushed out to assess my mother's condition. One of them asked me if I could move the car parked in front of the driveway. I immediately told him that it was my neighbor's car, and I had already spoken to him, but he refused to move it. The paramedics were forced to try and squeeze through the small gap between my neighbor's car and the fence. It was risky, but they had no choice. As they were getting my mother into the ambulance, my neighbor emerged from his car, screaming at the top of his lungs. He was waving his arms frantically, trying to stop the ambulance from leaving. The paramedics tried to reason with him, but he wouldn't listen. He was being extremely aggressive and started banging on the ambulance doors. It was a horrifying sight, and I was scared for my mother's safety. The police arrived soon after and tried to reason with my neighbor, but he was unrelenting and refused to move his car or let the ambulance leave. It was a tense situation, and I could feel my blood pressure rising with every passing moment. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the police managed to get my neighbor to move his car. The ambulance left and my mother received the medical attention she needed. It was a traumatic experience that left me shaken and angry at my neighbor's blatant disregard for others' safety. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. My mother was still recovering, and I was grateful that she had received timely medical attention. But my neighbor's behavior had put her life at risk, and I knew that I had to take action. I decided to file a complaint with the police department against my neighbor. I explained the entire incident, including how his unlawful parking had delayed the ambulance and put my mother's life in danger. The police assured me that they would take appropriate action. A few days later, I received a call from the police department. They informed me that my neighbor had been charged with several offenses, including obstruction of emergency services, disorderly conduct, and reckless endangerment. He was also fined heavily and had his driver's license suspended. It was a moment of justice that brought some relief to me and my family. However, the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, I received a letter from my neighbor's attorney. It was a legal notice stating that my neighbor was suing me for defamation and emotional distress. He claimed that I had made false allegations against him and had caused him mental anguish and financial loss. I was shocked and couldn't believe what I was reading. I knew that I had spoken the truth and had not made any false accusations. However, the thought of a legal battle and the possibility of losing the case was daunting. I decided to consult with a lawyer and prepare a strong defense. We gathered all the evidence we could find, including witness statements, police reports, and medical records. We also reached out to the paramedics who had responded to the call and asked them to provide a statement. The legal battle was long and stressful. My neighbor's lawyer tried everything he could to discredit me and my evidence. He argued that his client had not intentionally parked his car to block the ambulance and that the entire incident was a misunderstanding. However, we had strong evidence that proved otherwise. The witness statements, police reports, and medical records were all in our favor. We also had the support of the paramedics who had responded to the call and had seen firsthand what had happened. After months of legal proceedings, the case finally came to a close. The judge ruled in our favor, stating that my neighbor had indeed obstructed emergency services and put my mother's life in danger. He also dismissed my neighbor's defamation and emotional distress claims, stating that there was no evidence to support them. It was a huge relief to finally have the legal battle behind me. However, the incident had left a lasting impact on me and my family. We had lost trust in our neighbor and were always wary of his actions. As for my neighbor, he was left with a heavy fine and a suspended driver's license. He was also required to perform community service and attend anger management classes. It was a lesson for all of us. We learned the importance of being considerate of our neighbors and understanding the severity of obstructing emergency services. We also learned that justice prevails and that standing up for what is right can lead to positive outcomes. Update. It has been a few years since the incident and my neighbor has since moved away. However, the impact of his actions still lingers on. My mother has made a full recovery and is doing well, but the memory of that traumatic day still haunts us. I have also become more vigilant about parking in shared driveways and ensuring that emergency services have clear access to our home. I hope that this incident serves as a cautionary tale for others, and that everyone understands the importance of being considerate and responsible members of the community. The next one is a petty revenge story. I had just moved into my new apartment and was thrilled to start this new chapter of my life. I had always dreamed of living on my own, and I was excited to finally have my own space. Unfortunately, my excitement was short-lived. My neighbors were extremely noisy, and it seemed like they never slept. At first, I tried to be patient. I figured that they would eventually quiet down, but after a few weeks of sleepless nights, I knew that I had to take action. I talked to them about their noise levels, but it was as if they didn't care at all. They continued to play loud music, argue, and slam doors, even late into the night. It was then that I realized that I had to do something more drastic. I researched different ways to soundproof my apartment, but everything seemed to be either too expensive or too complicated to install. That's when I came across an article about using white noise machines to block out unwanted noise. I ordered a white noise machine and set it up in my bedroom. I could still hear my neighbors, but the sound was muffled and bearable. However, it wasn't long before my neighbors found out about my new tactic, and they became even louder in retaliation. I knew that I had to find another solution. One day, I was walking through a toy store and spotted a massive water gun. It reminded me of the Super Soaker I had heard about in a similar situation, and I knew that it was the answer to my problem. I purchased the water gun, and it wasn't long before I had the chance to use it. It was a hot summer night, and my neighbors were having a party. They were shouting, singing, and playing loud music. I was fed up with their behavior, so I took the water gun out to my balcony and aimed it in their direction. I waited until they were all gathered around the speaker and sprayed them with ice-cold water. They were so surprised that they didn't even realize what had happened. For the next few days, I acted like nothing had happened. I greeted them with a smile and even brought them some cookies. They had no idea that I was the one behind the water gun, but they did start to wonder. They asked me if I had seen or heard anything strange that night, but I pretended to be just as confused as they were. A few weeks later, my neighbors knocked on my door and apologized for their behavior. They explained that they were going through a rough patch and didn't realize that their behavior was affecting me so much. I forgave them, and we ended up becoming good friends. They still had their parties, but they were more respectful and aware of their noise levels. But the story doesn't end there. A few months later, I received a knock on my door. It was the landlord, and he informed me that my neighbors had been evicted. They had fallen behind on their rent, and they had caused damage to their apartment. I was shocked and saddened by the news, but I knew that it was their fault. Update. A year later, I ran into my former neighbors on the street. They were homeless and living in a tent on the side of the road. They apologized for their behavior again and asked me if I could help them out. I was hesitant at first, but I knew that they needed my help. I invited them to stay with me for a few nights, and I helped them find a job and a new place to live. We ended up becoming even closer friends, and I learned that sometimes it pays to be patient and understanding. People can change for the better, and sometimes all they need is a little bit of help and understanding from someone else. I was glad that I had given them a second chance, and I was happy to see them get back on their feet. However, the story doesn't end there either. A few months after they had moved out, I received a letter from them. They had enclosed a small token of their appreciation and gratitude for helping them out when they were down on their luck. It was a beautiful painting that they had done themselves, and it depicted a scene of our apartment building with the sun setting in the background. It was a touching gesture, and I was so grateful for it. It reminded me that kindness and understanding can go a long way, and that sometimes even the smallest act of kindness can have a huge impact on someone else's life. In the end, I was glad that I had taken action against my noisy neighbors. But I was even more grateful for the unexpected friendship that had developed between us. I had learned that sometimes it's important to stand up for yourself and take action. But it's also important to be patient, understanding, and willing to forgive. The last one is an entitled people story. Growing up, I always felt like I was the unwanted child in my family. My mother got primary custody of me, but my brother and sister were her first priority, and I was always the mistake child. My grandfather on my father's side was wealthy and spoiled his grandchildren, so I had a lot of spending money, a new car for my 16th birthday, and my college and university paid for. My siblings became envious of me, and they teased me constantly. When I turned 13, I decided to move in with my father to escape their teasing. Fast forward to a few years ago, my husband's best friend passed away in a car accident, and her 6-year-old son, Max, came under our care. Max was having a hard time adjusting to his new life, and we wanted to do something to make him happy, so we decided to take him on a safari trip to Africa. It was something he had always wanted to do, and we felt it would be a great way to help him heal. My sister, who had always been resentful towards me, became angry and demanded that I take her 8-year-old son, William, instead of Max. She accused me of not caring for my own family and being selfish. I was taken aback by her sudden outburst and couldn't believe she could be so cruel. I explained to her that Max needed this trip to help him heal, and we had already planned and budgeted for it. Besides, William had been on several trips with his parents, and it was Max's turn now. My sister wasn't convinced, and she took her anger out on me. She called me a bad uncle and refused to speak with me. My brother joined in the argument, and he took my sister's side, saying I was being selfish and not considering my family. Despite their hurtful comments, my husband and I decided to go ahead with our plans and take Max on the safari trip. We spent months researching and planning every detail of the trip to make sure it was perfect for him. We wanted to make sure he saw everything he had ever dreamed of and more. The day finally arrived, and we set off for Africa. It was an incredible experience. We saw lions, giraffes, elephants, and so much more. Max was thrilled, and we could see the joy in his eyes. It was like all his troubles had disappeared, and he was just enjoying life. As the days passed, we grew closer as a family. My husband and I felt like we were finally doing something meaningful with our lives, and we were grateful for the opportunity to care for Max. He was an amazing child, and we knew we would do anything to make him happy. The safari trip ended, and we returned home. My sister and brother had not spoken to us in weeks, and we didn't know what to expect. We were relieved when they apologized and admitted they were wrong. They said they had been blinded by their jealousy and had not understood the importance of the trip for Max. After the trip, our relationship with Max grew stronger. We became his family, and he became our son. We enrolled him in a good school and made sure he had all the support he needed to thrive. He was thriving and doing well in his studies. Years passed, and Max grew up to be a handsome young man. He decided to go to college and study biology, and we were proud of him. One day, while on a research trip in Africa, he was attacked by a lion. We were devastated when we heard the news, and we rushed to be by his side. Thankfully, he survived. It was a tough time for our family, especially for Max. He had suffered multiple injuries, and we were all worried about his recovery. The doctors told us it would take some time, but with proper care and attention, he would eventually heal. We spent the next few weeks by his side, taking turns to care for him. We helped him with his physical therapy, and we made sure he had everything he needed to recover. It was a difficult time, but we knew we had to be strong for him. As the weeks turned into months, we saw gradual progress in Max's recovery. He started to regain his strength, and he was able to move around on his own. It was a relief to see him getting better, and we were hopeful that he would make a full recovery. During this time, my sister and brother were a constant presence, offering their support and help. They had realized the value of family, and they wanted to make things right. We were grateful for their help, and we knew that we had all grown closer as a result of this experience. One day, Max surprised us all by announcing that he wanted to return to Africa to continue his research. We were surprised, but also proud of him for not letting the attack deter him from his dreams. We knew it would be a tough journey, but we supported him every step of the way. Max returned to Africa, and we kept in touch through video calls and messages. He told us about his research and the progress he was making. It was clear that he had found his calling in life, and we were happy to see him pursuing his passion. Months passed, and we received news that Max had made a major breakthrough in his research. He had discovered a new species of animal, and his work was being hailed as a major contribution to the field of biology. We were overjoyed to hear the news, and we knew that Max had finally found his purpose in life. Max returned home to a hero's welcome, and we celebrated his achievement. It was a reminder of how far we had come as a family and how much we had overcome. We were grateful for everything that had happened, and we knew that we would always be there for each other no matter what. Update. Today, Max is a renowned biologist, and his work has earned him international recognition. He continues to make important discoveries in the field of biology and has become an inspiration to many young scientists. Our family has grown stronger as a result of everything we have been through, and we know that we will always be there for each other, no matter what challenges we may face. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.